Welcome back, gentlefolk and rapscallions of all persuasions. Today I'm going to be talking about what Mistborn did for the greater Cosmere. For those of you who may not be familiar with this concept, all of Brandon Sanderson's high fantasy books take place within the same in-world universe called the Cosmere. And in order for us to eventually get the big Easter egg crossovers, there was a lot of groundwork that had to be laid for this. And it's more obvious in more recent books, but it was very subtle in his early works like Elantris and Mistborn. Mistborn is where I always tell people to start with the Cosmere. I feel like it's a more accessible entry point than Elantris is. And Sanderson did a lot of things with Mistborn, one of which being that despite the Renaissance level of technology, it's a post-apocalyptic world. The Dark Lord won, and he's been on the throne for 1,000 years. The rebellion that our young heroine joins is only the latest iteration in a series of failed uprisings. The thieving crew who recruited her is made up of otherwise unremarkable men, except for the leader, who is one of the most notorious criminals in the world, and the only known person to escape from the slave prison, the Pits of Hathsin. In my opinion, the biggest, most important thing that Mistborn did for the rest of the Cosmere was to set up the major mechanics that form the foundation of the other magic systems that we see, and understanding all the investiture-based magic systems that exist in the Cosmere. Scadrial is a fairly unique planet as far as the Cosmere goes, because the humans didn't migrate there. They were created by the two shards that settled there, Preservation and Ruin. This sets up the idea that we have these pieces of deity scattered across the universe, and they can bestow some of their power on the sentient beings in various ways. This has huge implications for the Stormlight Archive, but this isn't a video about Roshar. Preservation is at a disadvantage in power struggles against Ruin because he gave more of himself to the creation of humanity than Ruin did, and this is why you see more of Ruin's direct influence on the people of Scadrial during the original trilogy than you see of Preservation. So let's dive into Realmatic Theory for just a moment. Within the Cosmere, everything has a physical, cognitive, and spiritual aspect, and the power of a shard can exist in 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. The way a shard's power creates a magic system depends on the interaction of that power with the world, and having the magic system of Mistborn involve the burning of metals to fuel the power, it was a great way to set up the idea that the physical state of a shard's power is always metal. This is a theme we see repeated throughout the Cosmere, and the interactions of the base elementic metals and their powers like tin, pewter, steel, and iron are important to keep in mind as well. The spiritual aspect of a shard's power is possibly the most esoteric and difficult to explain. The spiritual realm is where the shards themselves live and where all of their power comes from. So remember that part where Preservation gave more of himself than Ruin did when creating humanity? That power no longer exists in the spiritual realm, at least not directly. It's inside each and every human on the planet in the form of their soul, and more so in the people who are Allomancers. The body of Preservation itself became the beads of Lerasium that conferred the original powers of allomancy upon the people who swallowed them. Ruin's body, by contrast, is Atium, the most powerful weapon that a Mistborn can have, because it allows for a split-second glimpse into the future and expansion of the consciousness to deal with all of the extra information that entails, especially in a scenario like a combat situation, which is where it's most often used. It's never directly specified, but I feel like there were significantly smaller number of Lerasium beads ever created than Atium, even if we assume that those 2 beads left in the cavern by the time of Well of Ascension were created by the same natural deposition process that we find in the Pits of Hathsin and the Atium geodes. That is still a ridiculously small amount compared to the trove that we see at the end of Hero of Ages, when it's revealed that most of the Atium that was ever mined never left the place it was created, mostly under the care of the Khandra. But here's why there's so little Lerasium compared to Atium. It's not just that Preservation gave more of himself in the creation process, he also made a prison for Ruin out of his own power. This is the crux of the logbook conflict and what Vin undergoes in Well of Ascension when she's hearing the rhythm of the well calling to her. More on that in a minute. So much of Preservation's power went to creating this prison that what little he has left can't manifest in the way that we would recognize as a deity making a body for himself to observe his domain. All that he has left is existing as the mists. This is the power of a shard in gaseous form, and the reason that Vin and Spook can see better in the mists when they're burning tin. It's not just enhancing their senses and allowing them to see better. By using a power that is aligned with preservation, they're less clouded because they are more attuned to preservation himself. The power of bronze is another aspect of the Allomantic magic system that wonderfully sets up other things that come down the line in the Cosmere. It is possible to learn the different patterns that happen when another Allomancer is using their magic. Copper negating this ability is a core plot point, specifically when Vin discovers duralumin and is able to flare her bronze higher than she ever has before, along with being hemologically spiked to enhance this ability. And she hears what she thinks no one else has ever been able to, which is the rhythm of copper itself. And the idea that there are different rhythms associated with different powers is important to the wider Cosmere as well. When Vin takes up the power of preservation in Hero of Ages, we finally get a glimpse of what it means to have the power of a shard. And for all that power, what limitations are placed upon them and how their actions affect what actions their enemy shards can also take. When Ruin is unleashed at the end of Well of Ascension, he is able to cause a lot more problems on the planet than he otherwise would be able to, because preservation is on the verge of splintering at that point. He is able to hold on a little longer, but ultimately the power he used up in the Snapping Mists to make as many ATM mistings as possible as a counter to Ruin, plus the ages-long effect that this has all had on his mental state, leads to the death of the vessel. A shard without a vessel, power untamed, is a very dangerous thing in the Cosmere. Fortunately, preservation isn't left without a vessel for very long. And then we have what I consider to be the best executed ending to a fantasy series I have ever read. The Sanderson of Hero of Ages, where it is revealed that the prophecies were pointing at somebody all along, and in the moment where preservation and Ruin are both without vessels, Sazed is able to take up the powers of both. The process of ascending to be a vessel allowed his mind to expand to encompass all of the knowledge he was carrying in his copper mines, the records of a world that no longer existed passed down with reverence from scholar to scholar, the ideals of a pre-cataclysmic planet enshrined in the traditions of dead religions. With the powers those shards granted in the brief time that he took them on, he was able to move the planet back into its proper orbit, restore the flora and fauna, and protect the people hidden in the sheltering caves that the Lord Ruler built against the eventuality that Ruin was going to destroy the world. Because taking on the power of a shard gives you the ability to do great things and the ability to understand how to do them, but not exactly what to do, and that's where the knowledge in his copper mines came in. And this is also why the world was left in the state that it was after the Lord Ruler tried to use the power. Sazed must now balance the contradictory natures of the two different shards within him. If he were of a different temperament, it's very possible the god he became would have been discord instead of harmony, which, while they refer to aspects of personality, refer to rhythms and tones as well. And I can't wait to see what else happens in the Cosmere with the implications of having two different shards held by the same vessel. So in the meantime, drop down to the comments, let me know anything I missed and what you think Mistborn did for the Cosmere, or what the other early books did for the greater Cosmere with the more and more Easter eggs that we eventually get. Until then, do all those delicious things that feed the almighty algorithm, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!